Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be, I think, hopefully, if I'm doing my job correctly, a pretty valuable, useful piece of content for you all. I've been wanting to make a video for a while on this topic of psychedelic therapy for depression and what we know about it, and try to break down a little bit about my insights into how to use psychedelics to resolve your depression. So that's what we're going to be covering today. It's probably going to be a long video. Fair warning for anyone who likes short videos. This is probably not the video for you. And I should probably just give a caveat at the top of the video here that I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a trained clinician. So if you're looking for somebody who, from that perspective on psychedelic therapy for depression, please bear that in mind when you're watching this video. So with all that being said, I wanted to just kind of unpack this here, lay it out for you, and explain what my understanding of the steps are in psychedelic therapy, just in case you're somebody who either, is fascinated with this topic, wants to know more about it, or if you're somebody who, might be dealing with depression yourself and you can't afford a therapist and you have access to psychedelics, or you like psychedelics and you want to give a go at trying to take yourself through this process. Not saying you should, not saying that's a wise decision, but I know there are people out there trying to self-treat for depression with psychedelics already. Hopefully something in this video will be of value to you. So that's kind of the basic idea and the spirit in which I'm making this video. It's just to inform, to kind of elucidate, to share a few of my opinions and my experiences, and to kind of help you along your path, whether that's just from knowledge or whether that's something more personal. So let's get into it. Before we do, I want to say really quick, for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Dave. I'm a coach. I'm a hypnotherapist. I work with people in the psychedelic space. So I'm trained in understanding a lot of different kind of aspects of human psychology. I'm fascinated with psychedelics. I've been doing them for decades now in my own life. I'm a huge psychonaut. I'm fascinated with self-actualization, spirituality, personal growth, personal transformation, these types of topics. This is what I talk about on the channel here. So if that's your bag, you're definitely in the right place. If that's not your bag, then maybe you're not in the right place, but hopefully something I say here will be of value to you anyways. So with all that said, I know I'm talking fast, had a little too much caffeine. I'm definitely a rambler. So hopefully this video will be to the point, and let's go ahead and dive into it here. So real quick, off the top is 106 degrees outside today. I'm batch shooting a bunch of content. I just shot another video before this. If I sweat, my apologies. My AC is off because it's too loud to film with it, and it's really hot out. My house isn't that well insulated, so I'm going to do my best to not look like a total sweaty mess on camera. But bear with me if I do. Okay. So depression and psychedelics. Obviously, there are millions of people. More than ever, we have a mental health crisis out there. We have millions and millions of people that need help, specifically with depression and anxiety being the big two, right? We talk a lot about anxiety on this channel, and I've dealt with depression on and off the majority of my adult life. And, I've done psychedelics the majority of my adult life too. So I certainly have personal experience when it comes to the interplay of these two forces, if you will. And I have a lot to say about it. I have a lot of insight to share. And about 3 years ago, I had a breakthrough in understanding depression. And I've made videos about this before that didn't get any traction. Maybe this will land on, more ears and eyes than the last one did. But I had a breakthrough in understanding what depression is, or at least a unique angle on depression that I want to communicate to you to give you some insight on maybe what's happening with depression. See, basically, when we study NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, part of what we're taught is what's called modeling. And modeling is learning what the internal steps are, the internal structure of an experience in order to create a particular outcome. So you can use modeling to understand how someone gets good at a particular skill, for example, or how someone learns something really quickly, for example, or how an expert in a certain area does what they do. But it can also be used to understand mental health issues, problems, struggles, challenges. There's all kinds of accounts in the field of NLP of how modeling has been used effectively to study and understand how people get stuck, things like learning disabilities, for example, and then how to restructure the thought path in order to have a different experience. This is at the heart of what we do in NLP. So, the reason I'm telling you that is a few years ago, I started to model out my own depression and try to really unpack what is the structure of what I'm doing internally that creates the effect of depression. And I kind of had an aha moment with it. What I realized is that with depression, generally speaking, a lot of people in NLP tend to think of modeling as things we do. But there are also things we're not doing that create results as well, right? And so I had this aha moment where I realized that part of what depression is, or at least one form of depression, there's probably multiple forms and different aspects to what we call depression, but one form of it, part of what it is that we have, what we call values in our life. So values are things that are important to us, things that are deeply, profoundly meaningful. So these can be states, these can be experiences, these can be they generally tend to be abstractions and generalizations about life. Things like, for example, freedom, peace, well-being, contentment, strength, power. But they could also be you could value things like learning. You could value things like a particular, thing that you're interested in, like surfing, for example. So we have values in our life, and our values are our touch points that are what are important to us. And what I discovered as I was modeling out my own depression was that what happens to create depression, I think, is that we have values in our life. We have things that are important to us. Everybody, you can't have a nervous system and not have something, important, whether it's survival, whether it's food, whether it's pleasure, whether it's, family, whether it's belonging, whether it's whatever it is to you, freedom, novelty. Obviously, different people have different values, and this is why we have a vast variety of different types of human beings. But every human being is driven by values. So what I started to notice was that when I went through depression, what happened is that the things that I valued, the values that I valued, were effectively deleted. They stopped being there. I stopped having a relationship or an experience of my own values. And at the heart of that, what I think happens is this, and I think this is a huge part of what drives depression. And I'm sharing all this up front so that as we start to unpack what we know about psychedelic therapy, this will make sense. Okay? I think what happens is that in depression, what happens is we have things in life that we value, that we care about, that are important to us, that become wounded from our point of view in some way. So whether that is something is no longer available to us that we wanted, whether that is there's someone we cared about that isn't in our life, or there is something that we would like to experience or achieve that feels like it's further away from us now, or there is something we need that we're afraid or hopeless that we can't have. There's some sort of wounding to what it is that we value. And when something that is important to us gets, wounded from in our perception, not even necessarily in reality, maybe it's not even true. Maybe it's a story. Maybe it's something we're telling ourselves or perception we're having that's not factual. But subjectively, when we start to have an experience of the things that we care about causing us pain, what I think happens is the brain downregulates and shuts off caring about that thing or thinking about that thing even. And we start to delete out and cut out the possibility of having the thing that we value. Does that make sense? And so what I've noticed happens for people is that as the thing that we care about and value is, becomes painful and then is either downregulated and numbed out in the brain or abandoned altogether, we generally don't replace it with a new set of values. We generally don't discover something else that we value to put in its place. So we are simply left with effectively a hole where there used to be a thing we cared about, right? And so what I've noticed happens is that is often the structure, that is often what's driving depression. What we experience as this big, overwhelming state is often really a bunch of referencing or not trying to reference and then not being able to reference things that used to, cause us joy or motivation or excitement or passion that for whatever reason have become painful to us and are now downregulated or deleted or absent, and we haven't found anything else to replace it with. That's what I think creates depression. So, take that for whatever you will. Again, I'm not a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist. This is just my observation as an NLP practitioner, as a coach, as someone who has dealt with depression myself. Obviously I have a lot of people in my life, because we all do, who deal with depression. So this is what I've seen. Anyways, so I wanted to just kind of put that out front, because that was my breakthrough 3 years ago. And then when I started to read about the Johns Hopkins protocol and what they were doing for psychedelic therapy, what I noticed right away, sure enough, is that at the heart of the therapy, of their therapeutic process, is identifying core values and reclaiming core values that for whatever reason have been lost and abandoned, and leaning into them, living into them. So punchline for you, if you don't want to watch the whole video, if you want to get over your depression, if you want to heal depression for yourself, you have to resolve this downregulation of the things that you value and you care about, discover things that you value and care about, and start to reclaim them and live with them at the center of your life. What is going to heal your depression or move it, maybe not heal it fully, but move it in the healthy direction, in the resolving direction, is starting to value again and leaning into living into your values. Your values bring you self-esteem when you live into them. Your values bring you joy and fulfillment when you live into them. Your values bring you passion and excitement and motivation and engagement and aliveness. You can't have aliveness with no values. It doesn't work, doesn't happen. So anyways, that's at the heart, sure enough, of the Johns Hopkins study. And so I read through how they were doing what they were doing and kind of extrapolated out what I think is going on. So this is how, if you want to know how to do psychedelic therapy, whether you're a coach too, whether you're just curious about it, or whether, you are thinking about, trying to work on this by yourself, which I would not recommend and I don't think is a good idea, but I get it. There's a lot of people out there who are broke, who are poor, who can't afford therapy. Therapy can be expensive, who need help. So I feel like this information needs to be there, even if that's not a great idea. So there are kind of 3 stages, right? There's the setup before you would do the psychedelic. So there's the pre-work, then there's knowing how to work with the psychedelic session itself, and then there's the post-work. So 1, 2, 3, there's kind of 3 stages here, right? So up front, ahead of time here, you want to do a few things to set yourself up. So before the session, before you take psychedelics, and this is probably going to be an ongoing process. Obviously, you're probably not going to cure your depression in one session. You might make a big dent in it. You might totally cure it. You might totally heal it. But more likely, it's going to take a few passes at this, especially if this is chronic, treatment-resistant, ongoing depression. But this is where I would start if I was doing this over and I needed to. I would start first with these pre-steps of journaling and exploring your trauma around attachment and authenticity. So this ties into the work of Gabor Mate, which if you don't know him and you're dealing with depression or anxiety or trauma. And spoiler alert, all of us have trauma. Childhood trauma is, almost everybody, and is at the root of all mental health issues. So you can't really have mental health issues, or it's not likely, I would say, without some form of trauma. So if you don't think you have trauma, but you're depressed or you're anxious, you probably have trauma that you're not aware of. So to understand trauma, there are two fundamental needs. Again, this is just a quick overview of Gabor Mate's work. Go watch the new movie, The Wisdom of Trauma. Read his books, explore his work. He's brilliant. He's deep. He's amazing. He's a hero. He's a champ, right? But real quick, as we're growing up as kids, we have two fundamental needs, according to Mate, that if either of these aren't met, result in trauma. So the first one is attachment. First need is attachment. Attachment in this case is not in the Buddhist sense of attachment and aversion. It's safe attachment with a parental figure. So you can think of this as you want, in a perfect world, in a healthy relationship with your parental figure, you're able to express your needs. You're able to, and they will respond to your needs immediately. You are able to reach out and they will reach back to you. You're held, you're touched, you feel safe, you feel contained, you feel loved, you feel seen and heard, you feel connected to, you feel like you belong. This is all attachment type stuff. So when you have healthy attachment, all of those kinds of feelings and emotions are met. Your parents are responsive to your needs, they pay attention to you, they make sure that you're included and that you have a sense of belonging, they acknowledge you, they care about what it is that you want or what you need or what's going on. They do their best to provide a safe environment for you to feel comfortable, protected, and belong inside of, right? So that's the first need. The second need is authenticity. So his whole distinction here, authenticity is your ability to self-express, particularly your emotions. So in childhood, as we're developing and going through the developmental phases, not only do we need to be able to feel safe to come and go with our parents and know that they will always be responsive to us and provide a safe relationship for us to come back to, feel connected with, but also that there's the space for us to be ourselves so that we can express ourselves, we can communicate, we can be wild, we can be silly, we can be goofy, we can be childish because we're children at that point, we can be whatever it is safely, and that's honored and allowed and acknowledged. So we have these two needs, attachment and authenticity, right? And his whole point is that oftentimes for a lot of people, what happens, again, if you don't have either one, there's trauma. If you're not allowed to be yourself, creates trauma. If you don't feel like you have safe, belonging, if you don't feel seen, heard, understood, acknowledged, connected to, protected, provided for, again, trauma. So if you're ignored, if you're abandoned, trauma. I hate talking about this, but it's what it is. It's what we've all lived through, right? So we have these two needs, these two core needs. Now, what I would do to set up a psychedelic session first is journal about these two aspects of your childhood. Did you grow up feeling, how were the attachment dynamics in your life? How were the authenticity dynamics in your life? Were you allowed to be yourself? Did you feel, that you could self-express, that you could do what you wanted to do, that you could say what you wanted to say, that you could bring up what you want to bring up in your family structure or however you grew up? And also, did you feel like you had safety? Did you feel like you had belonging? Did you feel like you're provided for, heard, cared about, seen, responded to, connected to, included? And if not, how did that, what was missing there? And how did that kind of pan out for you? How did that shape your character and your behavior? How did you react to that? What did you do in response to that? How have you overcompensated for that? Did you, for example, a lot of people become codependent if they didn't get, their needs met enough. right? So they self-sacrifice. They sacrifice their own authenticity. I will hide myself. I will hide my own, energeticness or my own, personality, and I will be whatever you want me to be in order to have belonging, right? So this kind of a thing. So you want to look at the relationship of these two kind of aspects, right? You also want to look at each one individually. How did I, how was my sense of attachment? How did I, and if that wasn't met, how did I respond to that? And in what ways has that shaped me? Then also, how's my authenticity? And if that wasn't met, how did that shape me as well? And I would journal about that just to start to get that stuff out so you can see it, so that you can reflect on it and really think about, what are the things, because I think for depression, a lot of times what happens is people have places where these weren't met early on and we become hopeless about it. And then the brain doing what it does, it generalizes out meanings, either about ourselves, usually, or about the world, or about relationships, or something like that. It'll make a generalization about, an experience we had. So if we weren't able to get one of these needs met in the way that we wanted, which is most people, then, what the brain will do, especially as a child, is make a generalized meaning about that. And then we live inside of that story, and that story shapes who we become as an adult, right? And so consider for a moment and journal down. I'm just on step one here. Journal down, how have these shaped you? And in what ways has it created a sense of loss of a need or a value that wasn't met for you, that now perhaps you're hopeless or skeptical or pessimistic or afraid or conflicted around not having? I would start there and just journal it out so that you're moving it from your unconscious mind down onto the paper and into your conscious awareness. So I'd start there. Next thing I would do is I would understand that you can have issues. So this is one of these core frames in psychedelic therapy. This is kind of a core mindset that they have in psychedelic therapy, in the Johns Hopkins study they use, which is called ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. One of the core ideas in acceptance and commitment therapy is you want to understand that you can have an issue and still move forward. So what happens for a lot of people when we have issues, when we have depression, anxiety, something's not working right, we're a little bit dysfunctional, is we feel like we need to be perfect or fixed before we can move forward with the steps in our life that will improve our life. So step number 2, before you take the psychedelic, I want you to just really consider, and I would suggest that you just really stew on, what it would be like to move forward even though you still have problems. To move forward with the solutions even though the problems are still there. What would it be like to have the problem and be taking action? How could you take action and start to improve things even though the problem's still there? And I think that that's a really useful frame because it unties you from feeling like you have to work on yourself forever to try and perfect things before you can move forward in your life, which a lot of people is a trap a lot of people fall into. I fell into it. So you can unpack that and be like, okay, so what would it be like? What would it be like to move forward and still have the problem? Could I, be depressed and still, work on, my education, or work on my financial life, or whatever problems need addressing in your life? Work on my relationships, work on my physical health, whatever it is. And really just kind of, again, we're setting up for the psychedelic session so that you have, kind of the stuff. What we're doing is we're formatting your attention so that when you take the medicine, what's going to happen is it'll come up with your mind, your body, your being, your inner wisdom will come up with answers and insights and reflections on this that you hadn't thought of before. But we're laying the groundwork first so that this conversation with yourself is kind of being kind of created and paved for you so that you have something to reflect on when you go into your psychedelic experience, right? So journal about your attachment and authenticity and any wounding there and how that shaped you. Get clear with the idea, just try on the idea of moving forward while still having the issue. And I would say as a caveat, again, as a hypnotherapist, that you could, very well end up resolving the issue through using psychedelics and working on yourself and not have to move forward with the problem. But I think it's a good mindset to be in. It gets you unstuck. It can be a both and. Consider that. Okay. Step 3 would be that I would, encourage you to, if you don't have one yet, start up a meditation practice. And there's a reason for this. There's a functional reason for this, couple functional reasons for this before you go into a psychedelic experience. So let me explain. So one of the most valuable mindsets that you can have really for the rest of your life, in any area of your life, but especially in a psychedelic scenario, if you're in a little too deep, or, just as a way of like being more productive and more powerful in your psychedelic experience, is this mindset of going meta. This mindset of, this is another mindset in psychedelic therapy that they use. They call it, moving to understanding that you are the space in which thoughts and emotions happen, and shifting your identity to being the space in which your experiences move through, rather than making your identity about what it is that you think or feel. So if I am the space, I am the nervous system, I am the mind, I am the consciousness in which, my thoughts and feelings arise, that gives me room to be present with everything. So that's called going meta. So instead of, having sadness and being on the ride of your sadness, you go meta and you witness your sadness. You are present with your sadness without being swept away inside of it, if that makes sense. Now, meditation is the best way to develop this skill. It's not the only way. You can go meta anyways. I mean, there are plenty of people out there who understand going meta who aren't meditators. But meditation is like weightlifting for the skill of going meta. It is developing the prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain here, which is, associated with executive control, with overview, with oversight of your, limbic impulses and your mammalian brain emotional responses to life. So the lower brain has these kind of impulses and emotions and feelings and imagery. And then your frontal brain, what makes us human, basically, prefrontal cortex, is your executive brain that can witness that can look at that can think about that can analyze that can make decisions about that can reflect on that, right? And meditation develops this part of the brain. It strengthens this part of the brain. Again, it's like weightlifting for this part of the brain. So before you take a psychedelic, this is a good skill to have, because this will save your ass. This is not only profoundly educational. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been on a psychedelic experience. My ability to go meta and witness my own experience and be present to it has taught me so much. But also, it will save you, because there will be times where a big emotion will come up inside of you, and it's really valuable. Or a big narrative. You get caught up in a story, right? You get caught up in some sort of a trip, and because the brain is making all these new connections and talking in different ways, it's really easy for these new stories that come up to be something that we take really seriously. And so when you go meta, you're able to not take your own story so seriously. You're able to not take these emotions so seriously while giving them respect. While honoring them. You're not suppressing emotions, you're not denying them. You're just having a little bit of spaciousness in which to be the container in which all these things happen. And that creates the room to have insight, the room to find a new way of relating to an old emotion, right? So if you're talking about depression, if you're talking about all the kind of pain that might be behind depression, this is going to be really useful. because generally what happens with depression, again, is the pain becomes so much that our brain down regulates, and then we're just kind of in that cloud, and we're actually kind of more prone to be caught up in the feeling, right? So this is a remedy to that. So I would do all that first. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. 1 is start by journaling about your trauma, and particularly about your attachment and authenticity. 2 would be understand that you have issues and that you can still take action. You can still move forward in life in these problem areas that you might be wanting to improve while having issues, kind of unlocking yourself from having to be perfect first. And then number 3 would be, I would practice, meditation, or at least the skill of going meta before you go into your trip. Okay. From there, what I would do is, then you want, as you're going into your trip day. So this is all prep, right? You're reflecting about your issues. You're developing this ability to go meta. And then on the day you're going to trip, let's talk about that day and the trip itself, right? So before you take the medicine, on the day of your medicine, first of all, I would clean your space. I would dial in wherever you're going to be so that it feels safe and secure. Set and setting is very important, right? Setting being the environment you're in, set being your mindset. So come to it knowing, that maybe some emotions are going to come up, that that you're going to have a wild, strange, far out experience. Hopefully it's not your first rodeo of psychedelics. And then you want to just kind of make a nice space so that you feel safe, so that you feel clean and clear, because it really does impact you in a very subtle way, but in a very powerful way. Then from there, what I would do is set an intention of the outcome you want to experience. How do you want to feel after your trip? And then I would let it go. Because here's the thing about setting an intention. What you're doing when you set an intention is you are formatting your unconscious mind to directionalize your attention in a certain, way. So you're saying, I'd like to end up somewhere over here. I'd like to feel this way. I'd like to have this kind of an experience. And don't be grandiose. Don't be like, I'd like to be a perfect golden god at the end of my trip and, have, gotten over everything. And from now on, I'm going to be enlightened. And don't be ridiculous. Just set a reasonable goal. What is it you want to experience? How do you want to feel afterwards? What direction do you want your life to move in? What are you hoping this trip will help you start to achieve? And then from that, let it go. Because what's going to happen is basically when you take a psychedelic, it's the neurological equivalent of shaking up a snow globe, right? So your default mode network, it switches off, and you get all this crosstalk from all these different parts of the brain that don't normally crosstalk. They're going to do all kinds of new things in different ways from anything you've ever experienced before. And with that, you can't predict and you can't control what's going to come up. But by setting an intention, it's kind of directionalizing that. And my experience is that the unconscious mind will know and will deliver you information to help you on that journey along the way. It just may not come in the way you thought it would. So if you're like, I want to be happy and I want to be happy in this particular way, and it's got to happen like this and like this, it may not happen. But if your intention is, I'd like to feel happier at the end of this, the way that your unconscious mind brings information up and experiences up for you to experience is going to be something that your conscious mind doesn't have the power to understand. But at the end of it, it may get you to that same place. So you want to let go of the outcome, because it's not necessarily, and sometimes we set outcomes that we think, that would be amazing. And then we end up with another outcome that's even better. We end up with something even bigger, more profound, more powerful, more whatever. So you want to let it go, but you want to set the intention. Okay. And then from there, again, you want to take the medicine, in a safe setting, ideally with a trip sitter or someone on call that you can call if things get a little too intense. I would consider having a Valium or something like that on hand in case you want to bring yourself down, in case it gets really bad, just in case, especially if you're doing this by yourself. But I would take the medicine in a safe setting with like music you like, an environment you like, have everything set up, and just be ready to go deep. Yeah. And then from there, you want to, again, during the experience, you want to remind yourself, you want to remember that you are the space in which the thoughts and the feelings arise. You want to move again to that meta position of witnessing, being present with your own experience, allowing the emotions to come up without judging or avoiding or abandoning or trying to control. That's the big one. The reason a lot of people have bad trips, this isn't the only reason, but this is often at the core of it, is people are in an experience that's bigger than they're used to, and they try to control it in some way. They try to control their thoughts. Maybe they're in a thought loop and they try to control their thoughts. They're having a big emotion or just big sensations, a lot of energy in the body, and they don't know what to do with it, and they try to control it. And it's that trying to contract, control this massive force and the tension between those two that creates fear, paranoia, anxiety, bad trips, right? So the way you circumvent that is you become, again, the space in which all the experiences move through. And that really does protect you so much from so much bad experience. So you want to focus on that as the medicine comes on, and just really, allow the thoughts to move through you, allow the thoughts to, guide you where they will, show you what they will, allow the epiphanies to move through you. If you would like to have a journal, some people like to journal out insights as they come up. Some people like to voice record, whatever works for you. If there's insights, you might want to record them so that you can reflect on them later. And just allow that to show you the point here. Again, tying back to the beginning of the video. I know this is a long video. The idea is that the psychedelics will show you things you value in life. They'll show you something beautiful, something interesting, something cute, something funny, something profound, something you'd never considered before, something, something valuable. You will be shown something that will move you in some way, whether it's a truth about the universe and the nature of life, whether it is, a healing reflection about yourself. Maybe you're too hard on yourself and you take the medicine and you see that and you get that and you're all like, right. Or maybe it's something as simple as you see a lot of patterns and colors and you realize you have a passion for patterns and colors. Or you realize you have a passion for thinking. Or you realize that, there are people you care about in your life that you haven't told them you care about them, right? These kinds of insights are super, super common on a psychedelic. And what they are is values coming to the surface. And so you want to really just take note. What are these values that, like, my deeper being still values, still cares about, that I've kind of been, filtering out, that are now coming up to the surface of my attention? And what happens if I fill my life with more of these values? And then take note of that. Don't necessarily write it down. Like, you don't want to be, sitting there writing the whole time you're tripping. Maybe some people do, but I wouldn't recommend it. But just, take, flag that. Yeah. And just reflect at the end of your trip on what values might have kind of arisen out of your experience. And then for the next day, so the third step here, or the third section, you want to take time to really reflect on that and probably journal about whatever it is you experienced and what values came up. And, if that doesn't work for you, another thing that really works for a lot of people is having conversation. So this is where a therapist would come in. They would talk with you. They'd help you make sense of maybe some of the big, strange experiences you had. That's integration work, right? Or maybe they just help you to talk about it so that you're moving your social brain, you're moving this information through your nervous system, and through co-regulating in a social way, it helps you to start to identify and get clearer about what those values were. And then consider for a moment, the next step is you want to really take in, what would it be like to live these values more? What would it be like if my day to day, I had these values being met more often? How could I structure my life? What could I do? And sometimes, let me just say, part of the reason we experience depression is that a lot of times we are frightened of losing something and having that cause us pain again. And this is a big one. This is a very common fear that, we realize there's something we cared about. We lost it. It caused us pain, so much pain, we became depressed. And so there's almost like a comfort blanket effect in the depression where we're buffered from having to be vulnerable and care about something again. And so as these values come up, one of the things that can come up with it is dealing with the fear of what would it be like to have things I care about in my life again. But spoiler alert, that's the deal. Part of feeling alive is caring. And part of caring is being vulnerable and knowing that what it is you care about can also hurt you, right? It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a thing it could be a car. It could be a materialistic thing you want. And the longing for the car causes you pain, and the not having the car causes you pain. And then the moment you have the car, now you're afraid of it being scratched or dinged or hurt or getting in an accident, right? Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Valuing something means vulnerability, but it also means feeling alive. It also means feeling happy. It also means feeling motivated. It also means feeling inspired, etc. So you want to really reflect day after. Okay, so what did I go through? What were the experiences I saw? What did they teach me? What are the shapes of the lessons here? What are the things I obviously value that I didn't realize I value? And then what would it be like to live with those things in my life more, to live into my values more? And then from there, you want to make a commitment. And I would say, this is my own twist on it, for my coaching work. Make a commitment to a small action that is meeting your values. And instead of trying to commit to, I'm going to work out every day and I'm going to get buff, or I'm going to eat perfect, or I'm going to be an amazing, slow down, dial it back to a really small goal. The idea is that as you stack small wins that are achievable for you over time, it becomes easier and easier and easier to continue winning, to continue achieving, to continue meeting your values and goals and needs. And as you do that, not only do you gain self-confidence and self-trust, but it snowballs. It becomes exponential. So if you've ever seen an exponential curve, it's like nothing's happening for a long time. Then all of a sudden it goes exponential and you have a huge growth spurt in whatever area, right? Getting a little dehydrated here. I knew this would be a long video. I knew I'd ramble a lot. It's a big topic. Right. So with anything exponential like that, it's like you're doubling. It's like that thing. If you had a penny and you doubled it every day for 30 days, how much money would you have at the end of that month? You'd have over $1 million. But the breakthrough to that $1 million is in the last few days of the month. Leading up to that, most of that month, you're not making that much money relatively, but then all of a sudden, boom, it spring loads into $1 million, right? So it's the same idea here. You want to take what your values are, and then you want to take baby steps, little tiny achievable steps, and in whatever areas that would be. And as you take those baby steps, just congratulate yourself. Acknowledge that you're taking action on your values. And this alone, just taking action on your values, will boost your self-esteem like you wouldn't believe. It's the secret to self-esteem. So some of the work I do with some of my clients, it's not something I'm really focused on right now, but I've done before, is self-esteem work and helping people to restructure their identity. And when you're doing identity work, really what that is you can shift around what you identify with in terms of your behaviors and sure, your value sets. And then as you start to take action and live into your values more, your self-esteem goes through the roof. It's absolutely amazing. So I would do all these things. Let me go over this again. There's like 10 steps here. So real quick here as a review. First thing I would do beforehand, I would start by journaling about my attachment issues and my authenticity issues. Get clear what might be there as a pattern, that I've kind of lost hope around or kind of down-regulated that's might be at the root of my depression. I would also understand that I could move forward in life while still having some issues. So then let go of this need to be totally fixed and totally perfect before I take action on the things that matter to me. I would also then practice meditation, at least for a few days going into the session so that you have the experience of going meta and witnessing your own thoughts and emotions. Then on the day of, during the session, I would set an intention of what I want the outcome to be on the other side of the experience, and then I would let it go. I would take the medicine, make sure that I have a clean, safe space, make sure that I have a trip sitter or someone on call. So if there's any issues, I can just speed dial them, boom. I would make sure that, I'm clear that I'm going to have a powerful experience here. And then I would take the medicine, I would have the trip. And during the trip, I would remind myself to be the space in which these emotions, thoughts, and feelings and experiences move through. So I would practice that going meta, and I would identify things that I care about, things that I value, whatever they are, whether they're abstract or whether they're concrete, like your pet or your favorite, instrument or, relationships in your life, people in your life, whatever it is, identify what it is that you value. And then afterwards, day after the trip, so take care of yourself, rest well, eat well, journal, reflect on, or have a conversation with someone to reflect on what it is you discovered in the experience. Again, just helping you to kind of pull that material out from your unconscious, from just internal, from thoughts, out into conscious reflection. In that, I would identify what, the values were that really came up, that were really powerful for you. And I would consider what it would be like to live life engaging that value system on a regular basis. Then from there, what I would do is I would commit to taking small baby step actions every day, and then after each baby step, make another one and another one and another one towards your value systems. So let's say you want to be the best in the world at something, like some huge goal like that, right? You want to, keep taking baby steps towards that goal again and again and again and again and again. In my experience, once you're in touch with your values and you're living in touch with your values, it will have a profoundly healing effect on your depression. There's more there, there's probably stuff will come up in the trip of things you need to forgive, maybe yourself, maybe someone else. Maybe it's about reorienting your attention away from something painful and towards what it is that really matters to you. Maybe it's about developing, an internal resource, skill set, like becoming more resilient or more committed or more engaged. Maybe it's, et cetera, et cetera. There will be stuff that comes up that, that you want to reflect on and that might need some working through and just, dialoguing out with yourself, journaling out with yourself. But generally speaking, as you identify your values and you start to live in alignment with them, it will powerfully change your experience for the better. This is what I've seen over and over and over with myself and with clients I've worked with. And this is something that I think people need to know. So that's psychedelic therapy as far as I understand it, based on the documents that are out there in a nutshell. This is also kind of based on my own experience, and just based off of some, kind of common sense, set in settings, common sense in psychedelic world, kind of setting up an intention. Again, that's common sense. That's like well-known. Give it a shot, or if you're not going to give it a shot, at least now kind of what they're up to. This is basically it. They work in 3 phases. They work in a setup phase where they're doing therapy. Surely in that therapy, what they're doing is starting to set up these ideas of, attachment, core wounding, which, early childhood trauma stuff, drawing attention to it, becoming aware of it, Surely they're setting up awareness of, what it is that you can do to unhook yourself from having to be perfect before you move forward in your life. Surely they have you, learning how to go meta, meditate, supporting you during the experience. And then afterwards, they're helping you to identify what values kind of came up and what it would be like to live in alignment with those values. So boom, that's a video. This is a long ass video. I know. I hope you got something out of it. I hope it was valuable for you. And yeah, if this makes sense to you, if this resonates for you, do me a favor, because I can make more content kind of like this or about this. Drop me, whatever has come up for you down below. If this hits home for you, if this is an aha moment for you, leave me a comment, leave me a like, maybe subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content. And, just give a thumbs up or something so that the YouTube algorithm knows that this is valuable content that I'm creating, so that it shares with more people who may be in a similar situation to yourself and need resources like this. So yeah, hopefully that hits home and that's useful for you. I'd like to know if it is. And by the way, also, I'll just put out there right now, I've been considering making probably like an online course that would not be pre-recorded. It would be something like a seminar or a series, like a Zoom call, to help people go through a whole process of values and upgrading your value system, healing your values, strengthening your values, aligning your values, empowering the values in your life so that they're popping and vibrant and alive. Because when you shift your values, particularly you shift your unconscious values that your unconscious mind are operating on, it's like your behavior becomes automatic and life just changes for the better, and you tend to feel so much better. So this is work I'm really passionate about. It's something I know a lot about. It's core work that I do with myself. And so if you're interested in something like that, like a call like that or a weekend seminar like that, let me know below, and that'll kind of give me some inspiration to start making something like that. Anyways, I've rambled long enough. This is almost an hour long. Hope you got something good out of it. Big love to you all. This is out there for all of you now to reference as some ideas and kind of a starting point for psychedelic therapy. If you're a psychedelic therapist yourself and you have commentary, positive or negative, that I'm totally off base here, or you're appreciating that something, is kind of on the mark here, let me know as well. I'd really appreciate any feedback and all feedback. Much love to you all. Wishing you all the happiness in the world. And I'll see you guys soon. Take care.